And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. So friends, today we're going to have a fun conversation. Let's talk about how to fire yourself. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about building a business to which you're not involved or to which you can be, quote, fired? You see, the reality is if we're going to face or experience an 8-figure exit, we've got to develop leadership in such a way that we can pass the baton. Now, whenever I say pass the baton, maybe your mind goes to the Olympic race. Interestingly enough, one of the very first relay races occurred in ancient Greece. And what it was a series of couriers shared the responsibility of delivering a message stick, literally a baton that had a message involved. Now, in the Olympics, the first race took place in 1908, and it was two 200-meter legs. Now, since then, there's been a ton of different variations. There's actually 2 different methods for changing how the baton is handed off. There's actually 2 different grips, so to speak. The first one is called the American grip. Now, what happens there is the runners are running side by side as the baton is passed. Now, that's a little different than the French grip. French grip is what I recognize. It's where the runner the first runner is leaning forward, looking back as the person who's going to hand the baton off runs up to them. And then when they reach a certain point, they hand the baton off to each other. So if we look at these particular grips, it's not that dissimilar than how we handle business. You may say in the American grip, you, the business owner, brings a counterpart directly beside you and you're running side by side, almost like a mentorship program. On the other hand, in business, you can have the French grip pass, which would be like a father-son scenario. A father who's been running the business and is looking back and handing the baton to a son or to a key employee or to a daughter or whomever that may be. So there's ways that we can pass the baton in our business. Now, if you've watched any sort of races of any length of time, you realize that a poor handoff, in other words, if the runner passes the baton off poorly, it could cost you the race. It could be detrimental. The U.S. Olympic team won 15 of 18 Olympic relays between 1920 and 2000. Now, since then, they've had a series of problems. They had a drop baton in 2008. They had a changeover offense. In other words, they were not able to pass the baton within the guidelines that they had for the particular race that they were running. So they had a changeover offense. And in each of these, it caused a problem, ultimately costing them the gold. If we bring it back to business, the same thing is true for us. If we want to experience the 8-figure exit, we have to make sure the baton is passed so that we can, quote, exit. So we can exit. If not, then we're going to be drugged back into the business. If not, we're going to lose substantial value. Franklin Templeton conducted a survey with 162 registered investment advisors. And they were looking at firms of a varying size from $100 million of revenue to $5 billion of revenue. And in the survey, they examined that 41% of business owners identified themselves as a prospective acquisition, merger, or buyout candidate who will leave after the transition. Think about that. 41% said, hey, we're done after this. If you do not pass the baton off properly, then we're going to run into some issues. So what causes this? Lack of planning. Investopedia on this topic, they made a quote which I thought was very interesting. They said, and I quote, "If a change in CEO is handled with care and the replacement is deemed a competent successor, then the company's stock price shouldn't be negatively impacted. Conversely, if the news of a departing CEO or of a new CEO seem to be mishandled, then the company's stock price may drop. Regardless, the handing off of the baton from one CEO to the next makes the stock more volatile." The same is true in your business. If you're trying to exit your company as the founder, as the CEO, whenever you're exiting, there's going to be some volatility. So we have to do everything within our power to reduce risk. Another thing we have to do is we have to mitigate the loss of knowledge or experience or the loss of key employees. See, as we go to exit our company at some time in the future, you, believe it or not, have a ton of data in your head. Data in your head that's never captured in some CRM somewhere. It's just from the trench knowledge. You have knowledge. You have data that can go back, that can help things. As you know where the skeletons are buried, so to speak. Just perhaps you have a key employee that's just as valuable. Maybe they have some skeletons in their closet that they want to work with. That's an issue that we often see whenever we have a poor transactions. We lose industry knowledge. We lose a key experience from a business owner as we lose a key employee. Another one you have is you have a declination of client experience. If you don't exit the business properly, your clients will suffer. I know whenever I was going through my particular transaction, my clients near and dear to my heart, many of these people, family, friends. I was just talking a few minutes ago with a colleague, and I said, so-and-so changed my diapers when I was little. This lady changed my diapers. I'm going to do what's right for this individual. She's been a part of my life now for over 40 years. Changed my diapers. I didn't want to have a declining client experience. Another thing that you can have if you don't hand out the baton properly is you could have increased attrition. Not only would you have clients leave, but you could also end up having attrition in your stats, your marketing stats. Perhaps you have followers that end up falling off. Attrition in your social capital. In other words, how people in your community view you and your company and the clients that you serve. Attrition amongst your team, as we spoke about earlier. And if you're not careful, the baton handoff could also lead to panic. Oh my goodness, we need to go out and do something irrational or something that we believe at that point is rational. And we look back in hindsight, it just didn't make sense. So now let's talk about how we effectively pass the baton for an 8-figure exit. You know, for some time now, I've spoken about decentralization. For some time, decentralization is the heart of the matter, and that's what we're ultimately speaking toward here through the baton passing. We're going to talk about how do we decentralize. But what is decentralization? Webster's dictionary defines decentralization as the dispersion or distribution of functions and powers. In other words, you, the business owner, you don't control everything. You have an operations team that helps you. You have a planning team that helps you. You have an advisory team that helps you. You have a finance team that helps you, a marketing team, etc. It's not just you, the business owner. So when we think about how we're going to hand the baton off, we realize it can't center around us. It can't center around a centralized position. So let's talk about how we're going to decentralize our company. Step number 1. You have to examine your current processes. What is it like to onboard a client? How do you get it from start to finish? How many contacts do you have to have with a client in order to onboard them? How do you onboard a client? What's your current processes? So you're looking at your processes and your functions. Another one is you've got to develop a system as you're decentralizing. Step 2 is you develop a system to complete each process. How should the task of the processes look from beginning to end? How do you streamline the processes to where they're quick? Do you have too much time between one point and another, which is costing you dollars? You've got to streamline the processes. So in order to do that, you're going to work backwards. You're going to figure out the best steps to achieve an outcome. Then you're going to put it to the test. That's number 3. You're going to test it. You're going to test your process. You're going to start out and you're going to see, hey, where do we have friction? Are our team members fussing about this particular area? Or is it taking us too long to onboard a client? Is it taking us too long to answer a question? There are a lot of processes that we run day in, day out. So we're looking for the most challenging parts of the process in order to simplify or shorten. We've got to shorten things down. If you create a process that allows a task to be completed in 9 minutes instead of 11, then basically you've created capacity. So let's just say, for example, that you just shave off 2 minutes per task, which is done twice a day by 2 employees. You just save the firm 49 hours per year of labor, just about 2 minutes within a process. So your processes is where you're going to decentralize, is where you're going to prepare for the handoff. And then as you implement, number 4, as you implement these processes, you're going to have to teach your team. You're going to have to give illustrations. You're going to have to sit down one by one. I can remember sitting in the room with one of my colleagues, walking through the sales process multiple times, face to face on the board, challenging each other. Hey, we're taking too much time here. How do we shorten this time frame up? How do we get the client, when they already say yes, that we can start earning money from them sooner than later? How do we shorten that time frame up? So we begin implementing. And then we use the newly minted process to develop SOPs, or standard operating procedures. I'm a big fan of standard operating procedures. Big fan. Why? Because it's easy to train. It removes intelligence from the picture for many times. Now, please don't look at that as degrading. In our office, I give this example often because it's easy for us to understand, and we can magnify this example 1,000 different ways. We had to clean the office. Okay, hey, we're going to clean the office. So we assume, and I hope you know what assume means, but we assume people know how to clean the office. Lo and behold, one day I looked around and the floors weren't cleaned. There was dirt on the floors. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. We're cleaning the office. So we changed things around. We brought my kids in, and then I wrote out a standard operating procedure for the process of cleaning the office. My daughter was about 12, 13, 14 years old at the time, and I had to write out a SOP, standard operating procedure, for her on how to vacuum the floors. And literally point number 1 is go get the vacuum cleaner from the closet by the bathroom in the hallway. Number 1. Cool. Number 2, make sure the vacuum bag is in the vacuum. Number 3, plug the vacuum in the outlet next to the couch in the front lobby. Number 4, start by vacuuming conference room number 1 from left to right, pull the chairs out, move the trash can. I mean, it was detailed. Why? Because I could then give my daughter this simple SOP, and believe it or not, she did far greater than the professionals did. She knew exactly what was expected of her, and she was able to achieve it. So friends, whenever we're trying to decentralize, everything comes down to systems and processes. Not only do we have to decentralize ourselves when it comes to preparing for the Baton handoff of our 8-figure exit, but we also have to look at the depth of our bench. Now, you've heard me talk about our bench for some time. Typically, I refer to like a football team or a baseball team. We're looking at if one player gets hurt, where's the next player going to fill in the gap? But there's a concept that speaks to too deep on the bench. Perhaps just maybe you've heard this expression, 1 is none and 2 is 1. Now, what does that mean? In other words, we have to have multiple methods to accomplish the same goal. Many, many times in my life, I've been in the woods. I love going out west. I mention this often. I love going out west, putting the backpack and living out of a backpack for 7, 10, 12 days. I love that. And what I've learned is that you can accomplish what you need to accomplish if you have the basics. But sometimes you need 2 of something. For example, you might carry an extra pair of batteries because you never know when your batteries are going to run out. Or you might carry an extra knife just in case you lose the one or the one becomes dull because you hit on a rock. Or you might, and then the list could go on and on. One of the things I always carry is a little bit of first aid, some clot bleeds or some things that if you get cut that you can prevent a blood clot, and some medical supplies. I just carry those. Then I carry 2 of everything for that because you just never know. You see, whenever you're dealing with your business, you're looking at your team and you're saying, hey, you never know if somebody is going to be here tomorrow. Not because of nefarious issues, but because of life. I've had companies that a key employee has been tragically killed in an accident. I've dealt with that. I've had issues where a key employee had cancer and life just became devastated. I've seen where family issues, mama getting sick, a daughter having some issues where a key employee has to drastically change their life. So when we're looking at the handoff, we have to look into our bench and say, what if so-and-so were not here tomorrow? How would we deal with that? In order to deal with the power of 2 deep on the bench, you need to do a few things. Number 1 is you want to improve collaboration. If you're looking at an employee saying, man, they possess a lot of knowledge, if they were gone, it'd be detrimental, then bring somebody alongside them for them to collaborate and teach. Another thing you can do is you gain greater return on your investment on your training spend. Cross-train. Let one employee in one department learn some insight and some information from an employee in another department. You want to empower your employees to share knowledge, to sharpen each other. You want to cross-train them. Third thing you can do in order to create a deep bench is look at sustainability. Look at sustainability. Can this employee maintain this level of activity for the foreseeable future? Many times they can, but oftentimes life and business just pours a lot on them. So we got to pay attention to sustainability. Can they run through the handoff? Can they go through the transition? Can they go through the sale of our business handling this amount of capacity? Maybe, maybe not. Number 4 is you want to increase employee engagement. How can you get your employees more engaged in the business? Is it perhaps that you can have them buy into the company? Or maybe, just maybe, you can have them teach extra company material. In other words, they go to a conference somewhere and they're teaching if they have the gift of teaching. The fifth thing you can do in order to create a deep team is to improve agility. Now, if you did any type of sports, more than likely you did some agility training. I had some surgery recently and I was doing some training and I noticed that I wasn't as limber in some exercising as I was before the surgery. So now I'm having to intensely focus on that mobility issue. The same is true with our employees. We want to increase their skill set. The more that we can increase their skill set within their particular career path, the greater agility they have whenever it comes time for baton handoff. And then 6 is you want to facilitate proper succession planning. You want to constantly work with your exit planning advisor, your business coach, and say, hey, what if X? How do we deal with this? And you're constantly working to grow the muscle of your team, the competency of your team. And you do that through succession planning. So friends, the reality is that at some point you will hand off the baton of your business. You will. Wouldn't it make sense if we go ahead and fire ourselves now, get ourselves out of the business so that we can hand the baton off properly and receive that 8-figure exit? Wouldn't it make sense? It makes sense for us to look at where we're going and begin planning for these functions. Now, again, as I mentioned last few episodes, dealing with employees, it's tough. Tough. Very tough. But we can accomplish this. So many people have in the past. So many people have experienced the 8-figure exit. We can as well. Friends, until next time, let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all, go out and make it a great day.